Learning how to program in your coding journey can be very daunting and can be very discouraging sometimes because the coding world, the programming world is very vast. There are different programming languages, different frameworks, different philosophies, coding philosophies, and different development tools. And on top of that, you're learning how to program on the side while working full-time at another job that's unrelated to software development. With all of these factors coming into play, making progress in your coding journey can often feel stagnant. So what you really need to do is you need to form a plan. So in this video, I'll be sharing 5 simple questions that would really help you out in forming a plan for the next year. So let's get started. Alright, so the first question I have for you is, what systems will you put in place to help you stay consistent in improving your programming skills? There's this popular book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and one of the themes of that book is that if you make small, incremental, systematic changes to your routine, that can lead to long-term success over time. One quote that really stuck out to me is, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And I think that quote is really interesting because if you really think about it, everyone has the same goals. Everyone is trying to land a software job, or everyone is trying to break into the tech industry, or everyone is trying to get better at programming. Everyone has the same goals. What makes a successful programmer different than a non-successful programmer? It's going to be the systems that they have. A common mistake that I've seen new programmers make is that they're not consistent in coding. A lot of these new programmers would get stuck when working on an exercise that we gave them. And then after we helped them out, a few days later they wouldn't have any questions, and then we would have to ask them how their code is doing. And then when we asked them how their code is doing, they would start working on their code again and get stuck again, and the cycle would repeat. And it seems like these kinds of programmers, the ones that we would always constantly have to ask how they're doing, these programmers are the ones who didn't do well in the program. The programmers who seemed to thrive in our program were the ones who were self-motivated, that they would be the ones asking us the questions, and we wouldn't be following up on them all the time. I think these programmers would just code whenever they had free time or whenever we bothered them about their code. They didn't seem to have a system in place. I don't think it's good to learn in sporadic bursts of time, because if you do it that way, you will have to spend a lot of time relearning the thing that you already learned. If you had a system in place where you code maybe like 30 minutes a day, then you would be able to code with some consistency and build some momentum as you grow your skills. Alright, my second question for you is, which programming languages and tools do you need to learn next year? You need to lay that out. If you haven't figured it out already, you really need to figure out your software development field. If you haven't figured that out already, it's going to be hard to figure out which programming languages you need to learn, because each field has specific languages and tools that they like to use. There's a lot of different software development fields out there that you can get into. It's not just web development. If you haven't figured out your software development field, you can look into the principles of Ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese concept that means reason for being. The idea here is to find your sense of purpose by exploring the convergence of 4 primary elements. The first one is what you love, which is your passion. 2 is what the world needs, which is your mission. 3 is what you're good at, which is your vocation. And then the 4th one is what you can get paid for, which is your profession. So when you're trying to figure out your software development field, you need to figure out which one you're most interested in, which one you're most good at, and which one does the market need. So for the first one, which is passion, maybe you look at your previous career and see maybe you can go into a software development field that intersects with your previous career. For the second one, which is what you're good at, you can look at the different programming languages that you're good at. Maybe there's one that you really hate, or maybe there's one that you're really good at. Then you can consider that. And the third one, which is the market or opportunity, or what the world needs and what you can get paid for, maybe you look at the internships that are around your area. Look in your local area and see what kind of software development jobs are around. So look at the software employers in your area and look at the tools and programming languages that they're looking for, and see if there's ones that you're interested in and that you're good at. Alright, the third question is, what projects do you want to tackle to apply your coding skills in real world scenarios? So I really want to highlight this idea of real world scenarios, because when you're starting to learn how to program, you're going to start off with what is called toy projects. And these toy projects are just projects that are really simple and small in scope, and they're just there to help you get better at programming and learn the basic fundamental skills for your programming language. By the way, if you're in the early stages of your programming journey, I've got a special gift for you. It's called my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a guide that will take you from no coding experience to building your first 4 projects. And the best part is it's free. It's a free gift to you. In this coding challenge, I guide you in 30 days to build 4 programming projects, and I give you some tutorials that are in C. But of course, these projects are really generic and really beginner friendly, and so you can actually code them in different programming languages. You can still benefit from this guide because you can just take the principles that are in my challenge and then apply them to your programming language. You can find the challenge in the link in the description, and if you download it and pay attention to what it says, you'll definitely learn some fundamental programming concepts that will give you a good foundation to your software development journey. An example of a toy program would be a calculator application that takes user input and allows you to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. This type of program is a program that you're developing because you just want to play around with the programming language. Employers are not going to really care about this type of program. If you go to your interview and then you tell them that you've coded a calculator application, they're not going to be impressed by it. Now, what they would be really impressed with is if you had a real world project. If you had a project that could be applied in the real world. For example, an expense tracker application that helps users manage their finances. That's an example of a real world project. My personalized finance app programming guide is an example of a real world project because it's something that you can actually apply to your actual finances. In that programming guide, I teach you how to take your credit card transactions and categorize them into different budget categories so you know how much you're spending. So for this upcoming year, I want you to be thinking of one simple project that you can tackle that can be applied in the real world. Alright, my fourth question is, how can you actively engage with coding communities or forums to seek support and foster learning? Learning in community is really important. It's really hard to learn how to code if you're just coding by yourself. I had this experience when I was a young preteen. I was learning how to code a TI-83, and I had this guide, this instruction manual for the TI-83, and I didn't know how to make sense of it, but I was able to build some programs based on some other programs that I saw. There wasn't much potential behind the programs because I didn't know that much about how to code in a TI-83, but I had a friend who was also coding in a TI-83. And my friend who was coding in a TI-83, I noticed that he was using the actual buttons of the TI-83 in his program, and that was something that I didn't know how to do. So I went up to my friend and asked him how he was able to do that, and he explained it to me. He showed me his code, and then I was immediately hit and struck by inspiration. That was a game changer for me because I didn't know that you could do that in the TI-83, but when I learned it, I was able to build a lot more different kinds of programs. And when I went to my first job, I joined a team of developers, and I learned so much about programming from that project. And when I joined that project, I fixed a lot of features and I fixed a lot of bugs, but as I was doing it, I had a team of developers who are reviewing my code. And when I would submit my code for code review, I didn't think I would get any feedback from my code because my code worked, but they actually gave a lot of good feedback and they pointed out a lot of bad practices in my code. And that's how I got a lot better at coding. Before I would submit my code for code review, I would do a lot of research online to see if I was coding it in the right way. And on top of that, whenever they would give me these tasks, I would have little to no experience on writing these kinds of code. I would have to ask the more senior developers for some advice and some tips on how to go about approaching the problem. I can't stress enough on how important it is to learn how to code in community and learn especially with developers who are more experienced than you. And that's because you don't know what you don't know. You need other people to tell you what you don't know so that you'll know what you don't know. And if you want to learn more about my experience in learning how to code in community, you can watch my other video on how to self-learn programming the right way. Alright, the last and final question is, have I identified professionals in the industry that I can connect with? Networking and having the right connections is the fastest and easiest way to get into the field that you want to get into. My first job was in networks and security, and I had no experience in that field, no education in that field, but what I did have was an internship. That internship was an internship on information assurance, and I had a good relationship with the director, and that director had a good relationship with my eventual first boss. If you look online and see some of the stories of people who got into the tech industry, a lot of them say that they got into their industry through an internal transfer, meaning they were working at their company and then there was a software opening and they expressed interest in that opening, and then they showed that they were willing to learn the tools and the language, and then because of that they were able to transfer So networking is really important. You can't just throw your resume around online and hope to get hired. You need to build some relationship with these employers. Alright, so those are the 5 simple questions that you should ask going into the new year. First one again is, what systems will you put in place to help you stay consistent in improving your programming skills? The second one is, which programming languages and tools do you need to learn about next year? The third one is, what projects do you want to tackle to apply your coding skills in real world scenarios? The fourth one is, how can you actively engage in coding communities or forums to seek support and foster learning? And the fifth one is, have I identified professionals in the industry I can connect with? Alright, so I hope these 5 questions are really helpful for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Why don't you go ahead and answer some of these questions in the comments below. I'd love to see how you're applying these questions to your programming journey. Alright, like I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting off in your programming journey and you don't know where to start, you can download my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a 30-day guide where I teach you how to build those 4 beginner programming projects. It's really beginner friendly, and I go step by step on how to build each one and I go through the tutorials that you need to build each one. So download that in the link in the description. Alright, that's it for this week's video. I hope it really helps you out, gives you some motivation and inspiration heading into the new year. And if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know in the comments section and I'll be sure to answer you there. And I'll see you next year. Peace.